I would like to introduce our CHED Talk presenter today, Matt Fisher, and he is
Intelligent access. So, intelligent access. I work for Intelligent Access. I'm a strategic account manager for Intelligent Access. And what do? We do integrated security systems, access control, CCTV, intrusion detection. We're headquarters in Raleigh, North Carolina. We've got branches in Tampa, Atlanta, opening one up in Charlotte, obviously Raleigh, Richmond, Pittsburgh, and Akron, Ohio is where we're located. So pretty much up and down the I-95 corridor and then out to Ohio is where we are. What's physical security? Anybody know what physical security is? Electronic physical security? What it would be? Anybody?
Keypads, electronic locks.
That's part of it. You know, I used to think it was that you had to be really physical and body build and keep people out of places. So essentially what you're doing with physical security is you're controlling who has access to locations with electronics, keypads, card readers, biometrics. So that's what physical security is. Vertical market, anybody know what a vertical market is in the business realm? Vertical market is a market that a business or a company goes after and says, hey, this is my expertise. I'm going after this segment of the market. So that's your vertical. So you get people that are subject matter experts in those, and that's what you go after. And you sell your goods and your services and your solutions to them. So our vertical markets that we have are healthcare, hospitals, you know, things such as that. We're working on Augusta Medical right now. If anybody's familiar with Fishersville, if you're coming down 64, right before you go over Afton Mountain, there's a hospital on the left. You can't miss it. That's Augusta Medical. We also work in the higher education market, so colleges. We have Liberty University that we do access control on, and University of Pitt up in Pittsburgh. The last main vertical market we have is critical infrastructure. Does anybody know what critical infrastructure is?
Power plants, water treatment centers.
Correct.
Anything that is required for life in large cities would be infrastructure.
And small cities too, right? So critical infrastructure is that. Do you all have when you look at your robot? Do you know what critical infrastructure your robot would be? What would be the main things that you can't do? You gotta have to make that robot work?
Batteries.
Batteries, which would be power.
A frame.
A frame. So that's going to be a structure. Anything else?
The wireless bridge.
Wireless bridge. Communication. Communication is a key part of the robot. How does it get from point A to point B? You all learned some of it. Some of the talk last night had to do with communication. But communication is a key part of the robot. So when you build a robot and you have a whole bunch of different groups around, how important is communication between each one of those groups? Or is it important?
Now you know how I feel for the classroom.
That's an important thing. Communication is one of the most important aspects that you can have when you're working from one group to another. It is the most important because you have this group that is functioning on this particular item, and this group that's function on another item. Both of them have to work together for the robot to work. They have to work. So this group has to communicate with this group somehow. So it's very important to have your communication in between the groups on the critical infrastructure side of the fence. Anybody know what the one of the largest critical infrastructure companies around, you know, in Virginia?
General Electric.
General Electric.
Dominion.
Yeah, Dominion. General Electric builds equipment that goes in the power plants for Dominion. That's one of the manufacturers that they use. But Dominion Power is the largest supplier of critical infrastructure here in the Virginia area anyway. So what do? I am the account manager for Dominion Power, and I'm responsible for security for Dominion Power, which is the physical security. So I'm the person that is in charge. Our company has a contract for Dominion. I don't know if anybody knows how big Dominion is. How big is Dominion? How many locations?
Awesome, about 17,000 employees.
Yeah, it's 17 to 18,000 employees. We do physical security in 500 locations, 20 states, from Houston to as far west as Kewanee, Wisconsin, which is a nuclear power plant. They go up north. So it's a really big enterprise. Their security group is based here in Richmond, and everything that happens in the Dominion side comes back to a central location, and it communicates back to the central location, typically via network or phone lines. Let's see here. And what do I do for Dominion? I coordinate the installation, the service. So we're steadily installing new access control and CCTV systems all the time, and then we have to service those locations. Some of those locations are what they call critical assets to the infrastructure. And a critical asset would mean that we would have a set response time that we have to go and run that service call and get it up and running. And typically that critical asset is usually about 5 or 6 hours away, and a hard place to find. Let's see here. I do all the system design work, and I do all the communication between the Dominion vendors, subcontractors, and our company. So I'm just the main point of contact to do all the communications back and forth. What goes into design of a access control system, CCTV system? Well, the first thing we have to do is communicate with the client on what they need to protect the area of access. I do a site visit, typically, and I will say that most of the locations are extremely cold right now in Dominion land. I was in Mount Storm, West Virginia, and Ohio this week, so I do a lot of traveling around to the Dominion sites. What are some of the things that get put into designing a system? One of them is that we look at is crime prevention through environmental design. What does that mean? Do you have an idea of what that could be? Crime prevention through environmental design.
Using like thorn bushes or stuff to keep people out?
Sure, absolutely. That would be a barrier. So what you really look at is what can you do to an area that you don't have to put security in, but it keeps crime away typically. And what's the number one is light. Usually if you light the area up, your criminals don't like light. They like to be in dark. Barriers, you want to take your barriers away from houses, homes that people can hide around. Sheets in Wawa gas stations. I'm sure you all have been there. Have you ever noticed how bright that parking lot is? And that when you look in the windows, you can see the whole store when you look in the front of the windows? That's environmental design. They designed that so that if a police officer was outside, they can see in and see everything that's going on. And it's lit up well. I research all the equipment that's out there to see what's best for the system, and then I design the system. I have a project kickoff, and communication is another one of the things I have to do on that aspect. So the meeting is really for communication, project kickoff. You all had a project kickoff on the 5th of January. That's what a project kickoff was. You know, you had your set plan of what you were going to do with a robot, and you got your plan or the game. So you got your instructions on what you had to do. So it's a project kickoff. What do? We help our customers meet government regulations. Some of them are government, some of them are other regulatory, private regulatory. Well, one of them is NERC. I don't know if you ran into NERC much, but that's a regulation where they say a person has to be trained for cyber assets. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but they have to be trained to be able to know where they have to put certain cyber assets. They have to be trained, and there's only a certain amount of people that have access to those. So we have to go in and put an access control system that says, hey, if you don't have this training, you can't go in. If you didn't pass this criminal background check, you can't go in, and that's part of the physical security. Some of the other sites that we do are MTSA. Anybody know what MTSA is? CFATs. These are areas that came out of the generation of the Department of Homeland Security, which I'm pretty sure everybody's probably heard of that, which came out of 9/11 when that department came out. They've came out with specific regulations on certain sites, and if you have a chemical of interest, and it's not an interesting chemical, but a chemical interest is of interest of a terrorist. So if the United States has a whole list of chemicals that they don't want to get in the hands of terrorists. So we have sites that we have to do extra security on, physical security, to keep those people out. And there's audit logs and everything, so they come in and do audits. Some of our locations, MTSA, that's the Maritime Transportation Security Act. That's where the Coast Guard has authority. And anything with a dock and is on navigable waterway and has chemicals of interest falls under MTSA. So you have to have special background checks. You have to carry a special card when you're on site to actually be on that site, because that chemical of interest is on site. Anybody have any questions so far? All right. What you got?
Do you do Lake Anna?
We do parts of Lake Anna on the nuclear side, and there are certain parts in the nuclear world that no one knows goes into those.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, we do Lake Anna. We do, well, all the nukes. Kewaunee is a nuclear power plant by Dominion that they're mothballing right now out in Wisconsin. I was definitely at a nuclear facility about a week ago, and definitely went through some extra searching while I was on site of my vehicle. So access control, just to kind of step on each one of the things that we do. Access control. How do you control a door? How do you stop someone from coming in and out of a door? Well, typically we use electric locks on doors. I'm sure you've all been in places where you couldn't get in. Well, typically it's an electronic lock, a magnetic lock. Anybody knows what know what a magnetic lock is? It's an electromagnetic lock. You put power on it. You can kind of create your own. It's a big coil of wire. You coil it up, and when you apply power to it, you make a magnet. And that's essentially, if you ever see these big rectangle pieces on the top of a door, it's a mag lock. It's magnetic force that's holding that door shut. Some of the other things are door strikes. You have a little solenoid. You ever heard, getting buzzed in? You hear that buzz sound? That's the electric solenoid, and so on. What determines what we use in a security access control system on certain doors is it's mainly fire code. Fire code tells us a lot of what kind of equipment we can put on the door. So we have to be well versed in fire code and the International Building Code. Anybody know what a fire rated door is? Probably not. It's just a little tidbit of knowledge. If you want to know what a fire rated door is, it's typically at stairwell doors. That one's probably a fire rated door. If you open the door and you look at the hinge side, you'll see a sticker on it, and it's going to tell you how long that door is rated for fire, is what it is. And when you have a fire rated door, you can't cut on the frame, or you can't cut on certain items of it, because that door is rated for so many hours of fire before it gets through. So it's designed for safety, so that if someone's at the top of the steps, they have more time for the fire department to get in on that. What are some of the challenges with access control? building codes, building construction, and communication. How do you get all of your equipment on the door back to a centralized location? So communication is typically the hardest part. How do you get back on it? CCTV, anybody know what CCTV stands for?
Closed circuit television.
Perfect, that's exactly what it stands for. So it's not being broadcast, it's closed on a certain system that you have access to. We install fixed cameras, PTZ cameras, covert cameras. Do you know what a covert camera would be?
It's like a hidden one.
Yes. Yes. Hidden cameras that you can't really tell that it's a camera. So we do install those from time to time. We install cameras and use an assisted IR light. Anybody know what IR, infrared illumination is? You ever seen that? No, it's not a laser. Infrared illumination? Well, infrared illumination, it's typically LEDs, and you can't typically see that light. It's usually at 900 nanometers is where it's at. But a camera can see that light. So if you're in a pitch black dark area and you light the area up with infrared illumination, the people that are in that area don't know that they can be seen, but it's lit up just like daytime. So that's infrared light, and we use that quite often, especially in areas where light pollution is a problem. They don't want the place lit up at night for light pollution. Little trick that you can use if you want to ever see infrared illumination is if you've got a camera, a camcorder, and you've got an infrared remote control. If you point that remote control at your camera, you'll see that light. You'll see the infrared light.
Except for iPhones.
Do what?
Except for iPhones.
Which uses a different technology.
Exactly.
The other thing that goes in with cameras, thermal cameras. Anybody ever seen a thermal camera image? Helicopters, military vehicles, targeting systems. We use thermal cameras also, and a thermal camera is nice because you can use it in an area that has no light, and you can come in with an analytic encoder, and you can, the camera with the encoder, with the brain, can tell if it's a person or if it's an animal crossing an area and give you an alarm. So we use them for detection. Perimeter detection typically is what we use them for.
Do you guys design the cameras or do you just install them?
We don't design the cameras, we design the system. So an integrated system would be going out and getting the best parts for the solution, and then one may be one manufacturer and another manufacturer, and you put it all together into a system and make it work. Very similar to a robot design. You've got different parts from different manufacturers. You all choose what part you want to use, and you kind of build it up and make your own robot out of that. So we don't manufacture them. We do write some of the programs, or there's some programming in some of this that we can customize on what happens on them. The cameras we typically use is a manufacturer called FLIR. They're probably one of the biggest manufacturers out there. And typically when you see it on the front of a helicopter, that's a FLIR camera. And those cameras run anywhere from $80,000 to $350,000 on those helicopters. They're pretty expensive. We don't use them that high in cost. The other thing that we do with cameras is use video analytics, which is very similar to the camera that we're looking at in this robot on what you can do. You can take a camera and you can give it a set of instructions of almost if-then statements, and the software analyzes what's coming in and gives you an output. So you can set cameras up to do things. You know, if you see this square, I want you to do this. You have to do it through programming, but that's analytics. We use analytics for human detection typically. So we put a camera in a big area and we shine it there. There might not be a big fence, but we use a processor that says, hey, that's a person crossing that. And, you know, why do you think it would be important if we flood an area and we just get an alarm on everything that goes through? What do you think it's important to specify exactly what we want to get an alarm on?
You don't want to have a lot of false positives.
That's exactly right. So Dominion's locations and a lot of our other critical infrastructure companies are all over the place, and they're usually out in wooded areas or out in the country. You have deer and you have all kinds of animals that will trip them all night long. Well, if you get 20 trips when that operator back here in Richmond gets 20 trips in a night, what do you think they're going to do at the end of the morning when another trip comes in? They're probably going to cut it off. They're not going to look at it anymore. So it's very important for us to set it up with, say, an analytic that focuses more on what we're looking for as a human trip. Yes, sir.
Sorry. Do you guys work with facial recognition?
We have used some facial recognition. It is something that's used. Ironically enough, you can kind of do facial recognition with image match with the software that we're using here. Great facial recognition is used mostly in Europe. In Europe, there's cameras all over the place. That's not how it is here in the United States. Europe, there are IP cameras on every street corner, and they're always watching. And they essentially take a bad guy, stick it into the software, and they're looking for that face. As soon as they get that match, they get the alarms into a processing system, and they know exactly where that person is when that happens on facial recognition. So, good question, and it is out there. Let's see here. The cameras all go back to using a central processor. We're using an IP camera on the robot. Does anybody know how an IP camera works out here? An IP camera is an internet protocol camera. It's a camera that you can put on a network. So if you have access to a network that's in California, you can take that camera, program the IP address in, stick it out in California, and when you hit that IP address, you can see the camera anywhere on the network that you're attached. So that's how we get a lot of our signals back, is network. They're coming back to network. So the important thing on networks is that there's usually only so much bandwidth that a camera can come back on. Y'all understand what bandwidth is?
Mm-hmm.
So this year the robot's limiting how much, or the transmitter, they're limiting how much bandwidth you can shoot from your robot to through the switch to your driver laptop. So with this camera, we're going to have to take the frames per second and compress it down to a smaller file so that we can get that to work. So that's kind of cameras. Anybody have any questions on cameras? If anybody has a question on security, I've been in it for 24, 25 years. I'll tell you if it's true or not on some of the movies. For instance, iris recognition is true. If you wanted to set up access control for iris, it does shoot it in the back of your eye, and no one's the same, so you can use that for access control. I haven't been to Busch Gardens in a while, but anybody been to Busch Gardens and had to put their hand on a reader?
Yeah.
All right, that's called hand geometry. It's access control there too. It's actually shooting light through your hand and looking at the veins in your hand. Everyone has different veins, so they're actually using biometrics at Busch Gardens to get you in the door. And that's actually attached to your card. And getting back to the cards, access control cards have changed over the years. Most of it's because of the government. And the reason being is you start getting a lot of personal information that's on databases. Anybody hear about databases that someone gets into and they pull information out? Birthdays, social security, numbers,
Credit
all
card
that.
numbers.
Credit card numbers,
Yeah.
everything. Well, we do biometrics also, where we're actually storing fingerprints on, into the system. And how bad would that be if someone could come in and pull data from somebody and get your fingerprints, and then use those fingerprints somehow, attach it to a crime somehow. So what the government has done is said, hey, we don't want, especially on the government side, they have what they call a FIPS card or a TWIC card. They don't want a database of a fingerprint or any of that pertinent information. All that information goes on a card. You carry that access control card. That access control card has all that information on it, your fingerprints, any type of biometrics they've pulled off of it on that card. So when you go to that biometric reader, you read the card, it indexes who you are, and it says, okay, this is Matt Fisher. All right, Matt, put your finger on it, and you put your finger on there, and then it compares your fingerprint that is loaded on the card, not in the database, to your finger. So you got to have two things. You got to have the card, And you have to have the finger. And typically the finger needs to have blood going through it, and you know, the old cut the finger off trick doesn't work.
Oh.
So don't try that at home. The last thing I'll touch on is perimeter detection. You've probably seen in the movies where you see these laser beams that are shooting across, and you put these special glasses on, and you can see the laser, and you just kind of go under it. That's not true. That doesn't work that way. But that being said, you do have photo beams that use what they call IR, again, but it's pulsed IR, so you can't see it, it's shooting so fast. So you'll see beams, and if you break the beam, you trip the alarm. PIRs, passive infrared detectors, they've got some of them in the building. You'll see a little white piece up in the corner. Passive infrared detector is looking for the movement of heat through segments. So it's it's actually sucking in heat, and it's looking for you crossing those. So that's a passive infrared detector. We also use lasers. We've used lasers. They work really well. They're pretty expensive to use it. They're designed very similar to have you ever seen a ceiling tile company putting ceiling tile in and they're shooting a laser across? It's a building laser, leveling out. Y'all ever see that? For security, it's very similar to that. It shoots a whole laser, and if you stick something into that area right there, it trips the alarm. But you can't see it. See it on a computer, but you can't see it with your eyes. Fence protection is another thing that we put in. We run cables or cables under the ground that detect movement or vibration of the fence cutting around perimeters of locations. Any questions on lasers or motions or any of that type of stuff? So education, education in this field, because the field is a very, very broad field where you have manufacturers, where you can work for manufacturers, you can work for software companies. The software companies are really where it is right now. If you can do the programming for this software and design the software, there's plenty of jobs, especially on the video analytic side of the fence. There's manufacturers and research locations all over the place. ODU has a big one that they have right now on video analytics. A degree in criminal justice degree would be good. Information systems, police science degree, database administration. Database is a big deal in the security side of the fence. Database, 17,000, 18,000 users. You have to keep up with it for audit purposes. Attributes, in the security business. Ability to communicate. Go ahead.
What made you get into software?
Came out of high school and got into it, and then the old school of hard knocks. Got my business administration going at night. It was just an opportunity. I got into it, and then as I got into it, I took interest in the security and helping customers, and I read everything that came down the pipe that came with, for access control or CCTV. Kept up with it, went to technical seminars and just learned it, along the way is what I did. It was just luck. It was a job that I was offered way back when, and it's kind of built that way. But the security industry has changed over the years. It really has, and it's really focused on cybersecurity and IT and all the government regulations. So it's getting to a point where degrees in certain areas are very helpful to get your foot in the door in these companies. Let's see here, attributes to be in the security side: ability to communicate, passion for helping people, interest in technology, focus on safety. You have to be very safety conscious when you're working for a large company such as Dominion, but that's with anything, because you can't get it back. When you get hurt, you can't get it back. When employees get hurt, their families are expecting them to come home with a paycheck, and when they're hurt, they're not. So that little extra time that you do on safety is well worth it, even though it doesn't seem like it is. Freak accidents happen all the time. And the last is a criminal background check. I get criminal background checks all the time. I get my fingerprints taken. And if you got a speeding ticket, they find it. If you caught a striped bass out of season and it was a felony, they catch it. If you got all of that, they catch it. And sometimes you have to go back to explain it, but you have to keep it clean. You have to keep it clean. Virginia, you have to be licensed. North Carolina, you have to be licensed. Both those put you back through a criminal background check and fingerprints. So you're always constantly getting your fingerprints done. They really look at that on the integrity. Your credit has to be good. They check your credit when you do background checks. Because if you have bad credit, then if the bad guy wants to get in somewhere, they may offer you some money to get in. So you have to keep good credit also, which no one ever looks at, but a lot of people in the security industry may not be able to get in because they might have bad credit on that. Any questions?
Would you suggest someone also get a security clearance if possible?
Do what?
Security clearance, is that something that you use in your job? Secret, top secret, classified?
They, in some of the areas that we do, we have to get what they call top secret clearance. It's typically on a military establishment that you need top secret. It's usually a need to know situation, so every job site is specific to that top secret clearance. It's always a fresh one. But we also get involved in what they call SCIFs. SCIF is a room that the government says has to have the 6 sides of it. Someone can't get in. You have to control the access to it. It's got alarms on it so that if you cut through the wall or you get in there, you have certain UL standards that are set for the SCIFs. We've got some SCIFs for some laboratories we're doing right now. Draper Labs, which is a big engineering firm that does a lot of security testing for the government. It's a laboratory, but because they're doing stuff for the government says you have to have these certain standards, and they have SCIF levels. So you've got background checks, and you got to pass them to get in.
Do you have people who try to break your service so you can make it better? Like people who try to break in to the places?
Or
To
testing.
make, yeah. Do you have a ninja association that you hire?
Usually we don't have to hire them. There's plenty of them that are doing it on their own.
I think you had some volunteers.
Yeah, I mean, usually there's plenty of them on their own. The issue when you're dealing with critical infrastructure is it's not only that they're getting in an area that they really shouldn't be. It's a safety issue. They're getting into an area that is very dangerous. Very, very dangerous, that if you touch the wrong thing, then there's no second chance. You touch the wrong thing, you're not there anymore. You're pretty much vaporized because it's so much power that some of these, not scare anybody, just if there's a fence, stay away. Don't go in there. But, you know, it's really for safety a lot of times. So we do have people that get in. Sometimes they get past what we have in. So you have to go back and make it better. You know, and that's what you have to shoot for, because there's nothing perfect in life, but you're always looking for ways to get better. They're typically pretty smart getting into these places. You have to be kind of one step ahead of them. Do a lot of research.
All right, well, thank you, Matt.
Oh, no
And
problem.
if anyone ever has questions for Mr. Fisher, he's here most of the time, so you can just kind of corner him and ask your questions too.
I'll tell you what I can anyway.
You forgot the floss?